this is from a gentleman named Eric Scott. I'm assuming he's a gentleman. And this is also sort of a more broad question, but it's also a little specific, and I kind of want to do this in my league.
Chase, please.
Yeah, shut up. Okay, so basically this is a roster spot for kick and punt returners.
Okay.
Just that position, kick returner, punt returner,
okay.
right? The scoring is the same, 10 yards, 6-point TD, -2, blah, 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 blah. But you cannot, like if you use Hester, you can't use him as a wide receiver and as the punt returner, kick returner.
I mean, but so few wide receivers are actually good punt returner, kick returners, so it doesn't matter.
So the question is, since these guys do actually score a decent amount of points, and finding gems of the dual return nature, and finding gems of the dual return, what round would you like to target these players?
In other words, if I had a league that gave you like points for return yards, like the same amount, like a point every 10 return yards.
For a specific, and a specific spot on the roster.
Right, and you had to start one. Where would you get one? Well, the way you look at it is the same thing we did when we talked about replacement value, right? You would basically look at last year's kick returners, say the top 10 or 12, say there's 12 teams in your league, and you'd say, what's the difference between the top guy and the last guy? You know, what's the drop-off? And if it's really significant, okay, that means you take them a little higher. Second thing is, how reliable are these guys year to year? I mean, if it's totally random, which guy is best year to year? Obviously, it's not. I mean, we know Hester is maybe the greatest of all time. Josh Cribbs is very good.
And he mentions those too.
But if a lot of it's random, like there's always like this one guy you can just pick up, you know, Mark Mariani on the Titans or whatever. I remember he was good one year, maybe just these punt returns. I think
didn't Randall Cobb do well for Green Bay?
He was good, but is he gonna? But there are a couple issues. One is you need kick returners, not punt returners, because the kick return you run 30 yards. You know, I mean, punt return you might run 6 or 7 yards. So you want guys returning a lot of kicks so to get your yards. Two, a lot of times the guy who ends up being the kick returner is like the 5th receiver that didn't really make the receiving rotation, right? It's just kind of the guy or that running back who's like the 3rd or 4th running back. He's the kick returner. So, you know, there's like the perennial kick returners like Hester and Cribbs, right? Dexter McCluster might be a good one in KC. And just look last year who did the best on all those. And then two, it's like a bunch of young guys who didn't make the roster as receivers, but they made it as returners. And as long as they're the everyday kick returner, who knows, they could be good. So I wouldn't draft those guys too early personally, but I would look at those factors before making an absolute statement like that. I would just research what the difference is between the top couple and the last couple, how random it is after you get away from the Cribbses and Hesters, and then you know how easy it is to find a guy who just didn't make it as a starting receiver or even like a 3rd or 4th receiver.
I kind of like this spot on the roster.
It's kind of cool. It's kind of a random thing. It can turn your whole league, but it's fun to kind of have special teams. Now, you know, IDP is great, right? Individual defensive players.
That's brutal.
You know, I love IDP. I mean, I'm a Giants fan. I'm all about. I grew up on defense, but a kick return is like a whole other interesting thing to look out for.
Yeah, great. Well, I hope that helps, Eric, and everyone. Send your questions to rotoheather@gmail.com. Thanks, guys.